subscribe.
Bringing down the Kray twins, a historical perspective 50 years on. On the 8th of May, 1968, a series of dawn raids were carried out by more than 100 Metropolitan Police detectives, led by Detective Sergeant Leonard Nipper Reed. The target of these raids was organized criminal gang that surrounded two East End gangsters that have passed into London folklore and garnered more column inches, true crime books, and documentaries than almost any other villains in the modern age. Ronnie and Reggie Kray are the archetypal British gangsters, up there with American anti-heroes like Al Scarface Capone, Johnny Torrio, and Lucky Luciano. Two blockbuster biopics have presented the twins as violent and troubled rogues whose criminality and ruthlessness is still tempered with some sense that we're not as bad as modern criminals are today. They only hurt their own, and they were nice to their mum, Violet Kray, so the story goes, and they didn't deal in drugs. Let's start with some of the facts about Ronnie and Reggie before considering quite why it is we remain so fascinated with them 50 years after their arrest. Born in October 1933, the twins grew up in the East End of London, going to school in Brick Lane. They were very much a product of the mixed demography of Whitechapel and Spitalfields, with English, Jewish, Irish, and Romani gypsy ancestors. The East End was somewhere you survived more than lived in the 1930s. This was an area long associated with poverty, overcrowding, immigration, and crime. The twins became involved with violence and street gangs very early in their lives, and even a spell of national service in 1952 did little to tame them. They bought a snooker hall in Mile End, and by the end of the 1950s were well-established local gangsters with a reputation for violence. But the boys were not content to be one of several gangsters. They wanted to be the firm in London. As the post-war austerity gave way to the swinging 60s, Ronnie and Reggie became part of the London scene. Their West End nightclub attracted the stars of the day, many of whom enjoyed the infamy of being pictured with the Krays. For the twins themselves, their celebrity status gave them some much-needed respectability within London society. It is hardly surprising that Ronnie later wrote that at the time, "Me and my brother ruled London. We were untouchable." Of course, such high-profile behavior brought the twins into the crosshairs of the police, especially when their rivalries with other London gangsters, like the Richardson brothers in the South, or their own internal and personal issues, ended in murders. On the 9th of March 1966, Ronnie Kray shot dead a member of the Richardson gang as he sat at the bar in the Blind Beggar pub on Whitechapel High Street. George Cornell's murder was a very public act, demonstrating Ronnie's belief that he was untouchable. He wasn't. Then in October 1967, Reggie, egged on by his twin, murdered Jack the Hat McVitie, a member of the Krays criminal organization who had supposedly tried to swindle them. From this point on, the twins were wanted men, and it was only a matter of time before the police managed to arrest and charge them. In March 1969, after a trial at the Old Bailey, Justice Stevenson famously declared that society has earned a rest from your activities and sent the pair to prison for life. The next time they saw the outside world was in 1982 when they attended their mother's funeral. By that time, Ronnie was in Broadmoor, having been certified insane in 1979. Most people have heard of the Krays and seen the David Bailey photographs. They rose to prominence in the 1960s, and their celebrity status has perhaps helped to mask the reality that these were two very brutal individuals. Both of the recent film biopics present the violence and Ronnie's mental illness, but temper it all with the prevailing notion that they were somehow decent working-class lads simply trying to survive in a harsh world. They loved their mum, and they never forgot where they came from. This is a very similar narrative to the one that surrounds the rise of the mafia firms in New York and Chicago after the First World War. We have popular culture and the documentaries and movies to thank for this. Some of the most watched films of the 1930s, Hollywood's golden age era, featured gangsters at home and abroad, and the image of the suited criminal complete with Tommy gun, Homburg hat, and the obligatory dolly bird became synonymous with cool. Perhaps because the early gangsters traded in bootlegged alcohol, banned by the U.S. government in one of the worst decisions it ever made, and then desperately tried to reinvent their operations as legitimate businesses. We don't see them for what they really were: ruthless, murdering, criminal organizations. It was when they thumbed their noses at the authorities or their activities impacted ordinary citizens that the authorities felt they had no choice but to hunt them down. The Krays, much more so than the Richardsons, it seems, were our gangsters. They showed that we too could have some proper criminals to rival the mafiosi across the pond. In recent years, the BBC have revived the memory of Birmingham's Peaky Blinders and transformed their relatively mundane criminal careers, turning them into gangsters that were able to give the mafia a run for their money. The Blinders have become anti-heroes to be looked up to, which is exactly how the twins wanted to be seen, as respectable businessmen who only used violence when it was absolutely necessary. Like all true crime myths, the idea that the Krays were respectable, decent, or eschewed violence except when it was absolutely necessary is a fiction, and it is the job of history and criminology to keep reminding us of that. The Krays have entered the realm of popular myth. The relative rarity of identical twins made the Krays stand out, as there were numerous other gangster brother teams in the East End in the 1950s to 1960s, such as the Richardson brothers, the Nash brothers, the Dixon brothers, the Wood brothers, the Malone brothers, the Webb brothers, and the Lambrianou brothers. But only the Krays live on in popular memory, with the rest forgotten. There have been more films and documentaries made about the Krays than any other British criminal. The Kray twins not only cultivated becoming popular cultural icons of their era, but they also wanted to become media icons. These sadistic twins initiated and accepted media practices that represented, remythologized, and recontextualized their lives. However, the fact that the Krays' criminal career came to an end with their convictions in 1969 allows their story, however unsavory and unpleasant it might be to be presented on a reassuring note, as the forces of law and order finally did triumph. Part of the appeal of the legend of the Krays is that their story ended with the dark side of life that they represented being vanquished. In general, twins' lives fascinate because of their rarity in culture. Their singularity forms the stuff of foundational myths and lends itself to speculations about repetition, dualities, and paradoxes. For Ronnie and Reggie Kray, local East End and London media lore hinted at two personalities: the gangster and the gentleman, the schizophrenic sadist and the clear-headed businessman, and the promiscuous homosexual and the monogamous married man. Ronnie suffered a heart attack at Broadmoor Hospital on the 15th of March 1995 and died 2 days later at the age of 61 at Wexham Park Hospital in Berkshire. Reggie was allowed out of prison in handcuffs to attend the funeral. Charlie Kray, Ronnie and Reggie's older brother, was released from prison in 1975 after serving 7 years of his 10-year sentence for his role in their gangland crime. Charlie was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment in 1997 for conspiracy to smuggle cocaine in an undercover drug sting. He died in prison of natural causes on the 4th of April 2000, age 72, with Reggie allowed out of prison to attend his older brother's funeral. During his incarceration, Reggie Kray became a born-again Christian. He was diagnosed with terminal bladder cancer in 2000. He was released from Wayland Prison on the 26th of August 2000 on compassionate grounds at the direction of Home Secretary Jack Straw. Reggie died from terminal cancer aged 66 on the 1st of October 2000. The final weeks of his life were spent with his wife of 3 years, Roberta, in a suite at the Townhouse Hotel at Norwich after he left the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital on 22nd September 2000. 10 days after his death, he was buried beside his brother Ronnie in Chingford Mount Cemetery. During the funeral, crowds of thousands lined up to applaud.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.